very pleased to be your moderator for this important and timely conversation today. And so joining me are three panel speakers. From Coventry, UK, we have Dr. Hoda Amel, Technology Manager, Additive Manufacturing from the Manufacturing Technology Center, also known as MTC. Joining us from Aachen, Germany is Jasmin. Jasmin, I hope I say your last name correctly, Saewe. And if that's incorrect, please correct it later. Head of the Laser Powder Bed Fusion Department at Fraunhofer ILT. And from Montreal, Canada is Arina van Oost, Vice President, Corporate Strategic Development and Innovation with Tecna Advanced Materials. So welcome, Hoda, Jasmin, and Arina. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to share your expertise and knowledge relating to environmental sustainability and AM. At this time, I would like each of you to introduce yourselves and give us a little bit of background about your expertise and professional experience, and describe generally about your current role and give us a little bit of understanding about your organizations, because some of you aren't well known to some of the participants here today, and we want them to get a better understanding of the organizations that you work with. So let's start with Hoda. If you could please introduce yourself in the MTC and tell us about your role there.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Hoda Amel, and I am a technology manager at MTC. So MTC is a part of the Catapult network within the UK, and what we do is bridging the gap between university and industry. So we do kind of more applied sort of research. What the Catapult centers that we are a part of do is kind of looking into more advanced manufacturing techniques. So the focus of the research at MTC is into digital manufacturing, and also additive manufacturing plays a huge part of that. So I'm from the additive manufacturing department within the MTC, also the National Center for Additive Manufacturing in the UK. So we are kind of the hub for additive manufacturing in the UK, trying to bring all the knowledge and expertise and share it with the rest of the UK. I have been at MTC for about 4.5 years now. I started looking after the polymer side of additive manufacturing, since I have a background in polymer additive manufacturing. I did my PhD in polymer additive manufacturing, and now I kind of basically look after all the strategy and our collaborations and technical quality of the work in the MTC. So as part of the strategy, obviously sustainability is a huge part of our strategy. So yeah, that's what we're working on defining what our next steps for the next 5 to 10 years are going to be.
Great, thank you so much. And moving on to Jasmin, could you share with us your background and what do you actually do at Fraunhofer ILT? And generally, what areas of research does the Institute work on?
Yeah, I would be happy to. So my name is Jasmin Saewe. It's very German, so don't worry, Sherry.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah. So my background is mechanical engineering, and I work here at Fraunhofer Institute for Laser Technology now nearly 5 years. And I'm focusing on laser powder bed fusion here at ILT. So we are a laser institute, so focused in additive manufacturing on laser processes as laser powder bed fusion and laser material deposition. And I'm head of the department LPBF, as we short term it. And we are focused mainly because of our history, since we are working on laser powder bed fusion now for 25 years. We had an anniversary last year of the basic patent. And since we are working on this process for such a long time, and the machines at that time were not available, we had to build them on our own. We have a lot of experience in building machines and adjusting them to our needs. And our main focus at the moment is increasing productivity of the process with different adjustments of the process in the machines. but not only focusing on processability, on productivity, but also getting the sustainability into the picture. And so for us at the moment, 2 years now, we are working on life cycle assessment and hope to get some more insight how to improve our process and put some numbers on the sustainability we are always promoting in AM.
Thank you. And moving on to Arina, this is your first Women in 3D Printing experience, your first TIPE conference. And so tell us about your background and your work at Tecna Advanced Materials, and introduce your company, please.
Yes. So I've been with Tecna since early 2020, so right at the beginning of COVID, I started here. I'm the VP for Corporate Strategic Development and Innovation, and since the end of 2020, also responsible for ESG, which stands for Environment, Social, and Governance. But we'll talk about that later. About me, ESG, or I'll keep it specific to ESG, I think. So it's new for me in my professional life. I haven't touched upon the topic before in my career. So, but I'm very much engaged as a person for the topic, and I think that's the primary driver for us to actually work on this topic so much within Tecna. So Tecna is a company that develops and produces micron and nano-sized materials for 3 segments. So we do additive manufacturing, so that's aluminum, nickel, and titanium alloys for additive manufacturing. For printed electronics, we do nano materials, so nano nickel and copper nickel. Sorry, copper nano. And for energy storage, we're working on silicon nano materials, which are for lithium-ion batteries. So it's obviously are a huge part of a sustainable future as well. So that's about it.
Well, those are great overviews. Thank you all. And so this panel is a little different than some of the other panels that I've moderated, and perhaps that the audience has seen, in that I'm going to ask each panelist very specific questions that are really tailored specifically to each speaker. And then at the end, I want to save some time for audience questions, and you can direct your questions to a specific person if you want. Just put those in the Q&A, and I'll be sure to make a point to get to as many as we can. So let's kick off our Q&A, starting with Hoda. Hoda, recently the UN Climate Change Conference, more commonly known as the COP26, was held in Glasgow, Scotland late last year. And the impact has been heard around the world. And what are you hearing from your peers at MTC and the AM companies in the UK in relation to the conference? And how does that impact some of the questions and challenges that you're seeing from your stakeholders?
Yeah. So first of all, I think what it's done is it's brought quite a lot of excitement to the AM community, because we obviously all see AM as an enabler for kind of addressing all of these issues that were brought up in the conference, and then all the targets that have been set to achieve by the set times. So everyone in AM actually has got quite excited about it, I think. What we now have to do as the AM community, I think, is, or what we see is that because of those targets that have been set, there's quite a lot of demand that now comes from the OEMs and the primes that work with the AM providers and AM companies for controlling their carbon footprint and their emissions. So that can be in terms of either materials, so making the materials either more bio-based or more sustainable in general, or making the processes having less impact, having less kind of environmental impact. So it's definitely been quite an uplift in terms of the sustainability agenda within AM, and it's definitely made the companies that were maybe not very concerned at the time about how they're working towards sustainability, or didn't really have it as part of their short-term and long-term roadmaps, to start actually thinking about it and start considering routes to make their products more sustainable, make their machines more sustainable, make their material more sustainable. And then reaching out for help from those who actually know how to help, basically.
Okay, so are you, do you feel that there are certain things that need to be done for sure in the industry? Do you have any positions that you want to share at this point?
Yeah, for sure. So because we work with quite a lot of customers who use AM, we're kind of aware of the challenges that they're seeing. Mostly, what we have seen is around materials. So people either want kind of more, well, going into thinking about polymers now, more bio-based materials, or materials that are easier to recycle. So it can be around when thinking about adopting the process, or when thinking about going about kind of starting to use AM, that's what they have in mind. So it's actually quite important for the AM machine vendors that their processes actually enable that, if they actually want to be able to stay in the market and keep selling, basically. Another thing that we kind of see is in terms of the raw materials. So how sustainably is the raw material being provided, but also is it now easy to recycle after use, and how reusable it is, and then how we can actually kind of go about the waste material. So how can we actually reduce the waste that we're producing through our processes? So these are some of the issues regarding material, but there's also a significant amount of interest, and it's kind of rising as well. And I know that Jasmin talked about life cycle analysis. It's having any data on life cycle analysis of any of the AM processes, because obviously the impact of the more traditional processes is better known because you have a lot of data on them. In terms of AM, you don't actually have that data, and the companies want to show that by using AM. Yes, your end product is going to be more sustainable because it's lighter, hopefully, and you'll be using less fuel or whatever. But in some cases, you're not actually flying the part, so you're not actually using any fuel. The part is going into a person that's walking around by it, so it doesn't really matter like how it's not actually using that much. It doesn't have that much carbon footprint in its use term. So it becomes really important how it's actually been produced and what sort of footprint it's had in the manufacturing stage. So that's really important at the moment.
Well, you teed that up very nicely for moving into hearing from Jasmin some more about life cycle assessment. So what is this life cycle assessment research that's known as LCA? And walk our attendees through the stages of an LCA and describe what really it does and how it can be impactful.
So life cycle analysis is now known for a lot of people, and the goal of life cycle assessment is very interesting because you want to obtain the environmental information first of all, and then you want to identify how to optimize the environmental impact. You want to use the data to present, as Hoda said, a sustainable product. So that's why you use life cycle assessment. And in life cycle assessment, you look at the whole product chain. So from the beginning, when we talk about AM, we talk about raw material, but also powder production, which is a big impact on the footprint of our process. Then we have the manufacturing step, which is mostly the part where we are focusing on as a research institute, because we really know our manufacturing process and can obtain all the data that is necessary there. But it also includes the post-processing part, which is mostly necessary for AM parts. Then we have the distribution. So how do we transfer the part to the final use? And then in the use, as Hoda said, we have so many different uses of our AM parts. If you think about aircraft, it's already known that it's important to look at the use of the part and how the emission or the environment is impacted by it. But there are other uses of AM parts where you still have to look at it to make it comparable to conventional manufacturing chains. And then in the end, you have the disposal or recycling of the part, which also impacts the life cycle assessment. And it's very important thinking about metal parts. How will you reuse it, or how will you dispose the waste? And so we talk about cradle to cradle or cradle to grave. This is something very interesting if you look at life cycle analysis. And if we, as a research institute, look at it, you see that it's a lot of complex data, a lot of influencing factors that come together, and you have to look at it. And for each part, for each data, you actually need an expert, right? So you have an expert on raw material, and there, for example, since it's a conventional process to generate raw material, you have a lot of data. But then thinking about powder atomization, that there hasn't been a lot of work done, at least not publicly, because I think we all know this is a very energy intensive process step, and it influences the footprint of the later on AM part or the whole life cycle analysis. So you really have to look at all those parts with an expert together, because we only can be one part in this whole analysis. So thinking about our part in this, as I mentioned, the process and really generating reliable data. So as Hoda said, there is not a lot of data for AM, but there is. But can we trust it? To be honest, there is some data, but for every data you have to have an expert look at it and see if it's reliable or not, and maybe measure it new to really have the right data, because you only have a good life cycle analysis of your part with all your processes if you use the right data. So this is something very important, which we as a research institute try to have a look on and try to work together with partners to give them the insight and the knowledge, to do a right life cycle analysis on this.
Great. So you work with both government and private industry, correct?
Correct. So in life cycle analysis, we see at the moment that there is a lot of drive within the industry sector, which is great. But then again, you cannot talk about it very much. So at the moment, we are including it in a lot of governmental funding projects to generate the data to make it open for everyone. And so everyone can use it, because I think we cannot do everything as one player. We have to generate a whole community on research data and use it.
Excellent point. Thank you. And moving on to Arina. So Arina, you've been working on Tecna's very first ever environmental, social, and governance ESG report that you plan to publish in the springtime this year. So tell us, what is ESG, and why did Tecna decide to publish its first ESG report?
Yes, happy to. So ESG is it's always a report, right? So it's published by a company or organization on, as you said, environment, social, and governance impacts. So it enables us to kind of be more transparent on the risk and opportunities that that we face as an organization in terms of these three items. So it consists of tools, metrics that help channel our in general, it consists of tools and metrics that help channel the focus and resources on the globe towards those businesses that are sustainable, and that have a future, a sustainable future for our globe, let's say. So those are our human focus, the resilient in the face of climate adversity, etc. So why we are doing it? Tecna's main customers are OEMs, and as you know, big companies have started this way before maybe us medium-sized companies. So they are asking us for being transparent about it, but also for improvements already. We have our main investor that is transitioning itself into a green tech investor. So they are also pushing us a lot in terms of improving on ESG. And then, of course, we have our employees that are also very much engaged by the topic. So also they are pushing on their side for the company to do more. And then Tecna is a really green tech company. So our main facility is hydropowered. So as Jasmin said, like a plasma atomization has a carbon footprint, but ours is actually quite small. We're using, or 95% of the gases we use are recycled within the system, so very little spillage there. Our cooling water is used for our heating system in a closed loop, so also there we don't use much resources. So we are a very green company, and I think it's time we start selling that as part of our corporate story. So aiming to become leaders in this green transition for the industry, and additive manufacturing is certainly a part of that.
So tell us about that pathway. Okay, you decide you're going to do this ESG report as a corporation. Where do you start? How do you get going? What were your biggest challenges in doing this? Has this been your first one that you've done yourself as well?
Yes,
For Tecna, okay.
So Tecna started more seriously to work on ESG in 2019. So before I came here, so I took it at the end of 2020, and that was also a first for me. So the first step is really to talk to your stakeholders, right? So to see what customers, what direction customers want you to go, what your investors want, but also beyond that. So the suppliers of your suppliers, where are they going? What are they doing? Also the customers of our customers, right? So a really broad scope to map out where the opportunities and impacts are, and how we can slowly but surely start improving that, because nothing in ESG is fast, right? It's really kind of doing a baseline measurement, then starting to improve little by little on all of these items, but all these little bits help. Then the next step was really to kind of reconcile these stakeholders and our business needs with the current, with the issues, right? And how can we improve ourselves without hurting our business needs or our customer needs in that sense. And then you come to the third hurdle, which is kind of setting these long-term objectives, where maybe for 2030 or companies talk about 2050, but you don't really have the roadmap yet of how the organization is going to get there. And obviously that requires some convincing for shareholders or management to say, okay, well, yes, we're going to sign up for this, even if we maybe don't know yet how to reach it.
And so the UN sustainability goals, known as SDGs, you had to choose amongst, there are, I believe, 17, correct?
17.
You have
yes.
to decide, okay, on these 17 UN sustainability goals, it's sort of like the metric that many companies are using for their ESG reporting to be a guideline, so you can report on the metrics relating to each of the SDGs that you choose. So how did you decide which ones to focus on out of the 17? And which ones did you decide to use?
Well, the SDGs are really goals set up by the United Nations for 2030, right? So there are also those long-term goals, and some of them are more general, like health, gender. Our company is working on that, but it's not specific for tecna. So we really looked at what are the focus areas that tecna has, what is the technology that tecna has, and where we can really make a difference. So we decided to work on 3 that are very relevant for our technology. So one is affordable and clean energy. So that's the energy storage segment that we're working in. Then a bit more relevant for additive manufacturing is the objective 9, which is industry, innovation, and infrastructure, where it talks a lot about the resilient supply chain, better resource management, innovative methods for recycling and end-of-life treatment. So many opportunities for us there. Like Hoda mentioned before, the raw material recycling is very high on our agenda, but also very complex, right? Because for additive manufacturing, our companies have very tight specifications for what the additive manufacturing powder should be like. And obviously the recycling is more done if I talk about aluminum in series, right? So you have the 5 series, the 7 series, but that's way too broad and contaminated for us to reuse it. So for now, it's kind of repurposed into other products instead of going back into our own little ecosystem, which is kind of the future that we want, right? That we are the raw materials keep coming back into our own circular ecosystem. But for now, I'm happy with the repurposing already, because it's a small or it's a good step towards reusing those resources. And the last one is ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns, which is also a lot about resource scarcity and making better resource use of those resources.
Okay, that also ties in very nicely to the next question that is in the Q&A. What help is available to define specific sustainability goals related to AM? And when you kicked off your remarks, Arina, you were talking about talking to the stakeholders. What is it that they want? And that's really the starting point for the process. And that's true whether or not you're going to be publishing an ESG report, because you don't really know what's important unless you talk to your stakeholders, because they're going to tell you what they need. And the larger companies tend to have are the ones putting the pressure on, as well
Exactly.
as investors and also employees too. You want to talk to your employees, because this is a great morale booster. People want to work for companies that are doing good environmentally and socially, and it's just a wonderful way to retain and attract staff.
Yeah.
So
Totally
it
agree.
looks like, I cannot believe our session time is now ended. But if anybody wasn't able,
Oh,
it's
okay.
to 1:30, right? 1:30 Eastern time. It seems like we just started. I don't see any other questions, and in the chat, there's been some comments along the way. But I'll just now turn it over to Lindsay, and hopefully we'll see some of you in the networking sessions.
I wanted to let you know that you actually have another 15 minutes if you'd like to continue your discussion.
Oh, good. I didn't realize, because I thought we were cut off right at the
I
half hour.
did see a couple questions in the Q&A, Sherry, if you wanted to ask the panelists those.
Oh, there's another one. Okay, great. What are the applications of repurposed powder? So I'll leave that open, because I think all of you can answer that question, but who wants to start?
So I think in the manufacturing term, we try to reuse the powder as much as possible, but we definitely have to have the specs in mind, because the more often you reuse your powder, the mechanical properties might be influenced by more oxidation of the powder or such things. Exactly. And also the particle size is influenced, because the finer powder will be more exposed, and so this is something you have to consider within manufacturing. So there's only a couple times you can reuse it, and it definitely depends on the alloy composition. But maybe Arina, it is more targeted to you.
Well, I just wanted to interject one thing, because we actually, those powders that have been reused and cannot really be reused in additive manufacturing anymore, we actually are working on developing a methodology to re-spheridize, so put them through the atomization again, to kind of revive them for the process. Working with an OEM to make that happen, particularly for titanium, because obviously that's a really expensive resource that would be good to reuse. So I just wanted to interject, and I think there's really opportunities for this type of material.
Yeah, I would add to that what we are starting to look at internally is kind of having a look at maybe a way of grading the powder and looking at defining applications that are actually can do with lower grades of powder, basically. It's really mostly the aerospace applications that actually need that really, really good powder. A lot of applications don't, and if the powder is actually from another, if it's basically waste powder and it's being repurposed, then it's kind of for free. So it reduces the cost of the process quite a lot. So and cost of a part. So it's definitely something worth looking into.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Any other comments on that question?
No,
Okay.
you're definitely looking into new purposes for those powders, right? Because again, our customers are pushing a lot for finding solutions for that.
All right, we have 4 more questions. So the next one is, as industrial AM and consumer 3D printers become more popular, how do we avoid promoting a culture of disposability? So what do we do with these used machines when people upgrade to the newest and latest, greatest technologies?
Are we talking about the subtractive manufacturing machines then, or really additive manufacturing only?
Additive, yes.
Yes. So actually there's quite a lot of turnover, new machines coming up, and especially now thinking about more productive systems. Many people or many industry partners invest in in bigger machines with more laser systems to increase the productivity. So there's a lot of old machines, I don't know, 5 years old, that are not as productive as state of the art at the moment. How can we increase the awareness of not disposing them? I think thinking about using universities is something very important. So we here in Aachen have a big university, technical university, but also smaller universities which would be happy to have a system to teach 3D printing to the new students, to the new generation, which I would think is the best invested waste we have with the machines.
Well, it also makes me think of the SDGs from the United Nations, because they are pushing a lot for access for all, right? So not only in here in the Western world, but obviously if those equipments can enable someone in poorer districts to print parts for local topics, it could really be an idea to use them in that way as well, right?
And we have a question specifically for Jasmin. Are you observing an increasing demand from the industry to conduct repurposing trials or trials with repurposed powders?
Yes, definitely. So we have done quite some studies already, mostly with powder, which is interesting maybe for aluminium, for example, is some alloys. We have done a lot of studies, but actually titanium as well, since it's a very expensive powder. There has been done a lot of studies, not only in laser powder bed fusion, but also in EBM, for example. Because if you have a heat source in your system, in your process, you really want to see how much oxygen the powder takes up. And so we did a lot of trials. I think an industry which is not very open-minded about it is the aircraft industry. They don't want to, even if it's possible and you still stick within the specs, they are not open about reusing powder, most of them, I would
No,
say.
yeah, that has a lot to do with the traceability, I think, right afterwards.
Definitely.
Yeah, and they have people's lives to worry about, so
Yes,
you can't
well.
fault them really.
I think we are all happy that they are so very specific about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent point. And the next question, have any of you thought about sustainability for AM processes like SLA or DLP that use UV curable materials?
Yeah, that is a a pain, isn't it? So some of the companies that we're actually working with now, they are looking at sourcing the material from like more bio-based materials, but also looking at ways that you can actually break the bonds in the UV cured materials. So looking at ways of actually probably not fully, but at least partially recycle. Well, it won't be recycling, but breaking the material up basically. There's not a huge amount that can be done on UV cured materials in terms of recycling, unfortunately. So I mean, what we are trying to do is to advise on using the processes for when you actually really need to, or if the life of the component actually is long enough to overlive the carbon footprint of the part, really.
Okay, well, hopefully this next question has a better outcome in terms of what can be done. Can you reuse support materials in some way? What are you seeing out there in your respective areas?
This is a conversation that we have actually had with our colleagues in our team, and it's like any other scrap metal, isn't it? So you can basically just melt it and reuse it for anything. You obviously, or I guess you can reatomize it as well. But yeah, but it's best if you don't have to. So best if you put as little support in as possible, which makes the design for AM aspect really important. But yeah, there are ways to recycle the support material.
And getting back to that question, because we had another person uptick this one question that we already answered, but what help is available to define specific sustainability goals related to AM? Getting back to the ESG reports, the sustainability reports that many companies now have published, they are on their websites. So if you go to some of the large companies, for sure, and Tecna, as soon as they publish theirs, see you'll see a sustainability report, or it might be under corporate social responsibility or ESG, and then you click into that and you can see what metrics are they using, what are they looking at, is it energy use, et cetera, and you can get some really good ideas on how other companies are doing it, and you can take that as a framework, focusing of course on AM, of how other companies are reporting on this, and then you can talk to your stakeholders to get really insightful perspectives on what they're looking for. What do they want to see you do, and what do they want to see you reporting on and working towards improving? Is it energy use? Is it water use? Is it there's just a whole bunch of different things you can look at. And then which UN sustainability goals do you want to choose? And most companies are using the UN sustainability goals as a framework. And there are many different standards out there. We talked about that in different separate conversations, this group, of which industry standards should you go with. Is it SASB here in the United States? Is it GRI? And there's many others to choose from. And those tend to help guide the process as well. So I hope that provides some help for the person that asked that question. We have another question here. What are your thoughts on how feed-forward feedback control plays a part in overall sustainability?
Not relevant for me.
Yeah. So there's a lot about kind of process monitoring and being able to use that to feed back to the system and either make changes on the fly or make the user aware of what they can change later on. Definitely very useful, because ultimately what you hopefully end up doing is reducing the waste that you produce. Hopefully you'll need to do less trial builds to get your material, your process kind of optimized for that specific material. And it's just yeah, I think there's a really good place for it. But it's just, you know, how we get there. It's not going as fast as I personally would like to see it going. At least the way we are using it. But yeah, there's definitely huge scope for any monitoring and control within the system.
I would like to transfer the question a little bit on life cycle analysis. Since if you have the life cycle analysis, you know all the steps along the life of a part, and you kind of can use this data feedback to improve the processes along the chain. So for me, it is important not only to talk about life cycle analysis or assessment, but also about life cycle engineering, because that's how we use it or want to use it in future. We want to identify the points where we can improve our processes to improve the footprint and print some more sustainable parts or reusable parts or reusable materials. So I think a big step to even know the main points along the process chain, where to improve, would be very helpful to increase sustainability.
Well, that is a really great conclusion to our session. It really is been a pleasure, and I apologize for my earlier comment about our session closing to an end there. I looked at the clock wrong, so I apologize. I thought it was rather quick. 45 minutes was a really good conversation. So I hope that the people that participated in the session can reach out to the speakers and find them at their different companies and be able to continue the conversation. And I'm sure there's going to be more industry conversations revolving around environmental sustainability and a social as well. And these are very important conversations. We want to definitely continue to do so and to share with one another what we're learning and best practices and the reports that we're producing, and really be able to drive the industry towards increased sustainability as we move into 2022 and beyond. So thank you all.